What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you with another solo video. You know what it is. It's Wednesday, so we're going through the matchups. We're going through your Week 8 start-sit questions, start-sit decisions that you're going to be facing, the players that you can flex, start, sit, drop, all that kind of stuff. If at any point in this video, you guys know the drill, hit the button that looks like this. If you receive any value, hit the like button. It helps us out tremendously. Comment any of your thoughts down below, any start-sit questions you have. We will answer them for you. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we go live. We go live before every primetime game, as well as anytime we post a new video. If you wish to support the channel financially, you can do so at patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. We have a couple Patreons there. As always, guys, there's timestamps in the description. So if at any point I'm going through a matchup and you only care about maybe your team's game, your favorite team's game, or a certain fantasy player that you have a question about, there will be timestamps in the description. You'll see them on the screen as well. You can skip right to that game. You don't have to listen to me talk about everything. And then we're gonna hit the intro, and then we're gonna get into the first game. All right, so before we get into the first game, we're going to talk about who's on bye week this week. Washington, Arizona, Jacksonville, and Houston. All those teams, you can't play any of their players if you have them, obviously, and you're going to have to find replacements elsewhere. We're starting to get to that point in the season where there's like four teams on bye each week, and you're going to need to maybe look at more deeper players than you usually would have at the beginning of the season when every team is playing. And then we introduced this last week, and you guys seem to enjoy it. So the fastest paced games of the week are as follows. I tweeted this out. I usually wait for Jared Smola to tweet them out, but I just went and found them myself because he was taking too long. So the fastest paced games of week 8 are supposed to be the Cowboys versus the Eagles. Obviously, fast paced games lend itself to more offensive plays. More offensive plays lend itself to more fantasy points for your running backs, receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, all that kind of stuff. But the Cowboys and Eagles game, I don't expect to be a very high scoring one, given the fact that Andy Dalton's not going to be playing and the Eagles are kind of their own kind of dumpster fire. This one obviously is a bigger deal. Titans versus Bengals being the second fastest paced game should be a big deal. There should be a lot of points in this one, a lot of fantasy points. You're going to be wanting to start a lot of players in that game. Chargers and Broncos, more so from the Chargers side, but same thing. You're going to want to be starting most of your fantasy players in that game. And then Bills Patriots, a little bit of a surprise there. Might be a bit higher scoring than we might have anticipated. Neither of those defenses are playing like they were last week. And one last thing before we get into TNF, Danny didn't have time to record the waiver wire show, so I'll just give you some of my favorite ads. I know your waivers have probably already ran already, but if they're still out there, go grab some of these guys. At quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater and Jimmy G are both startable this week, so you can go grab them if you need a streamer. At running back, some of these guys are stashes. Some of these guys you can play. Carlos Hyde with Chris Carson out, only 11% owned. You can go grab him. DJ Dallas is like barely owned at all. You could grab him if you need some upside on your bench. And then also JaMychal Hasty for the 49ers, 21% owned. Tevin Coleman, 27% owned. You can grab those guys if you need some running back depth. Speaking of 49ers, wide receiver-wise, the biggest ad of the week, if he's available in your league, 49% owned Brandon Ayuk, needs to be rostered. He's probably the best ad in fantasy right now with Deebo Samuel banged up with the hamstring injury, as well as Preston Williams, 22% owned. I would go grab him as well. With Tua starting, we really don't know who he's going to like. If he's going to like Devontae Parker, if he's going to like Mike Gesicki, if he's going to like Preston Williams could have a chance to increase his role with Tua coming in because the biggest problem for him has been target volume. And then finally, at the tight end position, Irv Smith at 7% owned. He needs to be owned more than that. I'm telling you right now, Irv Smith, with the potential that Kyle Rudolph might get traded with the Vikings likely being sellers at the trade deadline, Irv Smith has already seen his targets, his snap share, his red zone usage expand with Kyle Rudolph having less and less of a role. So Irv Smith absolutely needs to be owned if he's out there in your leagues. And then Harrison Bryant, same thing. With Austin Hooper dealing with appendicitis, he just had his appendix removed. We don't know if he's going to be back. Obviously, if he's back, he's not really that useful. But if Austin Hooper is out again, you can grab Harrison Bryant and throw him right into your lineup, especially with the news that Odell Beckham tore his ACL. And then defensive streamers, Titans going up against the Bengals at 27%. The Bengals it's going to be a high-scoring game, and normally you think high-scoring game, you don't want to be starting fantasy defenses against them, but usually in that case, that means there's going to be turnovers, going to be dropbacks, potential for sacks, all that kind of stuff. So Titans, not a bad defense there. And then Browns going up against the Raiders at 49%. I'm not sure that's the greatest option because the Raiders don't tend to turn the ball over that much, and they also have a solid offensive line, but that's another defense if you're desperate. All right, so finally to TNF. Falcons at Panthers. We've already seen this game. It happened actually a couple weeks ago. They played each other in week 5, I believe it was. But in this game, as I mentioned, you could start Teddy Bridgewater. He's 44% owned, so he should be out there in most leagues. And then you stream Matt Ryan. While this on the surface might look like a surefire shootout, these guys actually faced off already, only yielding 39 points. So people might be like, oh man, the over-under in this game is 49. That's like a smash over. But when they played the first time, it wasn't like a high-scoring game. Bridgewater, though, is a top 12 guy going against the league's worst defense against fantasy quarterbacks. So Bridgewater is definitely in my top 15 this week, and I would absolutely start him with confidence. While Matt Ryan is definitely startable, I would temper expectations for him. As I said last week about Drew Brees, the Panthers' pass defense has actually been pretty good. It hasn't been terrible. I thought personally it was going to be the worst pass defense in the league. But their run defense is so bad that fantasy quarterbacks are not scoring a lot of passing touchdowns against them because the running backs that play against the Panthers are doing a lot more work to their defense. So I expect Todd Gurley to have probably another couple touchdowns in this game. That's an easy transition to Todd Gurley. Obviously, you start him. And then Mike Davis. Okay, we got a little conflicting situation in Carolina. So Christian McCaffrey on Monday was seen practicing with a red jersey, meaning that he's an injured player and you're not supposed to hit him during practice. But towards the end of the practice, he actually took that jersey off. So I don't think Christian McCaffrey is going to play in this game. It's a Thursday night game, so I don't expect them to just rush him there. And normally, if you guys aren't familiar with how Thursday night practice or how practice week works when you have a Thursday night game, they generally don't do any hitting drills or any contact drills. It's usually just walkthroughs and like mental reps and stuff like that. So I'd imagine CMC is just kind of getting acclimated, getting back into the swing of things, and he'll be back next week. So if that is the case, then start Mike Davis with confidence in this game. Obviously, he hasn't been as good as he was the previous couple weeks, these last two, but he's still a startable asset against a terrible Falcons defense. So Todd Gurley, on the other hand, I was effectively wrong on Todd Gurley because despite his 3.8 true yards per carry that he's posted, 4.2 yards per touch, and 0.78 fantasy points per opportunity, all of which rank terrible among running backs, he's still a top 8 running back in fantasy. Why? Because he's scoring touchdowns. And that's exactly what he did last year in Los Angeles. And coming into the year, why I was lower on Todd Gurley was because I said Atlanta doesn't run the ball in the red zone. And that was true. But what they did was they shifted their mentality, and Dirk Cutter finally learned how to run the ball in the red zone. So they have been doing that. So I'll take the L on that. If you didn't draft Gurley because of that reason, that's why I never drafted him. But he is touchdown dependent. If he doesn't get a touchdown, he's not going to be good. That's just how Todd Gurley is. To the wide receiver position in this game, you start the 4 usuals in this game. This one's really easy. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones. You start all these guys because they're obvious, like every week starters. Julio Jones going up against Dante Jackson. Calvin Ridley going up against Troy Pride Jr. On the screen there. Rasul Douglas actually got hurt for the Panthers last week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember which. But that's great news for Calvin Ridley and Julio because he was playing like their best corner. And both of these guys are in great matchups and should be efficient in this one. So no worries about starting either of the Falcons guys. And then on the Panthers side of things, DJ Moore going up against Kendall Sheffield and Robbie Anderson going up against AJ Terrell. I'm not chasing Curtis Samuel. Don't worry about him. He kind of just has flash in the pan games. But Robbie Anderson actually, I'm pretty sure he leads the league in receiving yards right now. So despite Moore's kind of emergence from an efficiency perspective and the fact that he's had some big plays over the past couple of weeks, he's still receiving low target volume, like 5-6 targets a game, which is something to monitor. Maybe you want to sell DJ Moore high if you're not buying the fact that he's just going to keep up these huge plays. But Anderson, on the other hand, has received 8+ targets in 5 of the 7 games he's played with the Panthers and has yet to post under 55 receiving yards in any game thus far. So I think Anderson's by far the safer play. DJ Moore has played well as of late, but I still think Anderson is the guy to own there. To the tight end position in this game, obviously you don't start Ian Thomas. He hasn't been good at all. But you start Hayden Hurst because Hurst is finally playing better and starting to command more targets, making him a top 15 option. And that's honestly the only thing that his problem was. He just wasn't playing well. They are using him as a starting tight end in that Austin Hooper role. He just wasn't really commanding targets. And commanding targets is actually a skill. They're not going to throw the ball to you if you're not open or if you're not creating any kind of separation, whether it's like physically like running away from someone or just like boxing out defenders or whatever. But like Hayden Hurst is playing much better, which means he's going to be startable for fantasy. So to the 1 p.m. game, Steelers at Ravens, and this one should be a good game just from like a real life NFL perspective. Obviously in this game, you start Lamar Jackson because you start Lamar. Obviously he's not his MVP self from last year. He's not playing the same as he did last year, but he is still an every week starter regardless of matchup because he runs too much not to be. And the injury to Devin Bush in this game should help Lamar get something going on the ground because Devin Bush is obviously their fastest second level defender and he's out for the year with a torn ACL. In Ben Roethlisberger, you could definitely stream him in this matchup. He started the season with 4 straight games above 20 fantasy points, and he's disappointed the last 2 weeks in 2 easy matchups, frankly. So he moves to my quarterback 16 where he's usable, but I'd rather start maybe the 2 rookie quarterbacks, Herbert and Burrow. I'd rather start Jared Goff. I'd rather start Matt Stafford. There's like a number of guys that I would rather start over Ben Roethlisberger, but I do think you can start him if you have him. To the running back position in this game, James Conner is definitely a startable guy. And then in terms of the Ravens backfield, we're going to have to see how it goes. If I don't have to start any of these guys, I would hope to do that because I'd like to see how the split works out. But Dobbins and Edwards, either of which are startable in an absolute pinch. So I called the Ravens backfield fantasy Advil the past couple weeks because they give you headaches. The good thing about this is that Ingram's status is uncertain for week 8, and he's banged up and he's an older running back. So I expect him to kind of from here on out deal with injuries for the rest of the season. That's just how the running back position works. Unfortunately for Mark Ingram, who's been a great player his whole career, I think he might be over the hill and I think he might be done. But this backfield is probably going to get clearer. And for those of you out there that are like, what do you mean don't start J.K. Dobbins? He's an RB1 this week. Like, no, that's not how this works. J.K. Dobbins is not going to be a featured workhorse this week. And if he is, that's a great sign. But I don't expect that to be the case. I expect Gus Edwards to out-carry him, but J.K. Dobbins maybe to out-snap him. So I think it's going to be a relatively like 50-50 split between these guys. And who knows, maybe Justice Hill gets even involved, which is not great. But this is a horrible matchup against Pittsburgh. So like I said, if I can help it, I don't want to start either of these guys, but I think you can start both of them. If you're in a pinch, you have a bunch of guys on bye. Maybe you have Antonio Gibson on bye or whoever else is on bye this week. I do think you can flex either of these guys in a pinch. To the wide receiver position in this game, Marquise Brown is flex worthy. Start Deontay Johnson and then flex the other 2 Steelers wide receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool. Hollywood Brown is expected to go up against Joe Hayden in coverage. I know Hollywood has been kind of frustrating this season, but he has seen 6+ targets in every single game this season. So if he's going to see that kind of volume from a quarterback like Lamar and an offense that he's in, he's going to be startable every week. And he's caught at least 4 passes in all but one of those games that he's played this season. And that might not sound like huge volume, but it is for someone like Hollywood Brown, who's primarily getting targets down the field. He's not like a Golden Tate who gets targets close to the line of scrimmage. He gets deep, valuable targets in a good offense. So he should be usable in this one, even going against Joe Hayden. Since the Steelers wide receivers are a toss-up every single week, I'll say you could flex any one of these 3, as I mentioned, but based on the matchup this week, as you'll see on the screen right now, Juju might have a down game. We've seen every time that Deontay Johnson has been on the field, he's the target hog number 1 receiver. Juju has been the chain mover, and Claypool is the big play guy. With Juju Smith-Schuster going up against Marlon Humphrey, who's played incredible this season, had a bit of a slow start, but has really picked it up these past couple weeks, it wouldn't shock me if Juju Smith-Schuster has a down game in this one. And then obviously at tight end, you never sit Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is a stud tight end. And Eric Ebron actually is not, he's not in that range, obviously, but he's getting better and he's performing better for this offense. So I think he's startable most weeks, and he's caught 5+ passes in 3 of his last 4 games. So he's definitely carving out a role for himself. Hopefully he can get back to that like red zone usage that he was at in Indianapolis when he had 13 touchdowns in 2018. But regardless, Ebron is a usable tight end if you need one. And he might be available in your leagues. He's available in a couple leagues that I'm in. I'm actually kind of shocked about that. But to the next game, Rams at Dolphins. You stream Goff in this one and you sit Tua. Obviously, Tua's making his first start and he's going up against Aaron Donald and the Rams defense. So I don't know how it's going to go. I love Tua coming out. I thought he was one of the best quarterback prospects of the last couple of years, along with Joe Burrow. But Tua should be in for a bit of a rough start if I had to guess. But I mean, Herbert was great in his first start and I thought he was going to be in for a rough start. So what the hell do I know? But Goff performed well Monday night, given the circumstances. Chicago has been a matchup that you would have sat Jared Goff in, and I know for a fact I would have said sit Jared Goff in that matchup. He has another tough matchup in this game against the Dolphins, who have actually only given up 7 touchdown passes this year and have been much more susceptible to running backs. But I do think he's streamable as like a top 18 guy. Not a very high-end streamer. There's plenty of better ones out there, but he is usable if you need to use him. To the running back position in this game, you start Darrell Henderson and Myles Gaskin. Darrell Henderson has actually seen significant touches over 50% of the snaps in each of the last 2 games. On top of the efficiency that he's been showing, he's like one of the best running backs according to PFF. That makes him a solid RB2 in a top 10 matchup against fantasy running backs, as I mentioned in the Dolphins. So Darrell Henderson is a locked in top 18 running back for me. And the same is true for Myles Gaskin, who's been seeing like RB1 type volume over the last 4 to 5 weeks. As I mentioned last week, he's like top 10 in like yards per route participation and targets and carries and all these like statistical measures that are very good for running backs. So both guys are easily top 18 guys for me, and you can start both of them with confidence. To the wide receiver position, we've seen a little bit of a disappointment from the two Rams wide receivers, given what we expected coming into the season. To be honest, I think I'm moving both of them kind of continuously down rest of season because I see them more as mid to low wide receiver twos instead of the back end wide receiver ones that I thought they were going to be. And they kind of showed that at the beginning of the season, but neither of them has performed to the standard that I thought they would have, likely due to a very high run to pass split in Los Angeles. The Rams are running the ball at a crazy high clip, and they're only 28th in pass plays per game. They're only throwing the ball about 33 times per game, which is very, very low. And I'll talk about some other teams that are kind of in that category that you wouldn't have expected, and maybe some that are a lot higher. But the Rams are just not throwing the ball enough as they did last year for Kupp and Woods to be as valuable as they were. So Woods in this game going up against Xavier Howard is not a great matchup either. Xavier Howard is more of like the ball hawk type corner rather than the shutdown guy, but he's still a good corner, and Woods will probably have a down game in this one. Kupp, on the other hand, has a very high advantage according to PFF, so I think he should be okay. But again, last week they underperformed, and I know it was a tough matchup against the Bears, but they've kind of strung together a number of performances where they're underperforming. Like Woods has been solid in terms of consistency, but he's only had like one good game where he actually helped you win. It's just been like he didn't kill you every other week. So onto the Dolphins side of things, Devontae Parker will probably most definitely see shadow coverage from Jalen Ramsey in this game, who, despite having a bit of a down season, lends itself to Preston Williams potentially having a bigger game against Troy Hill, who he's going up against. And as I mentioned when I talked about the pickups earlier this week, earlier in this video, Preston Williams, you got to pick him up now because there's a chance that he has like a huge game, huge target volume in this one because Parker has a tough matchup, because maybe Tua worked with him more in practice and is more comfortable with him. We just don't know. And Preston Williams is a talented receiver. Obviously, we've all seen that. And if Tua is going to come in and just start favoring him, that's just what happens sometimes. We saw Justin Herbert come in and start favoring Keenan Allen, rightfully so. But when Tyrod Taylor was in there, he was throwing the ball to Mike Williams all the time. Every quarterback is different. They all have their own preferences. And just because Fitzpatrick liked Devontae Parker doesn't necessarily mean that Tua is going to like Devontae Parker better. And I'm almost willing to bet he likes Preston Williams better because Preston Williams is a better separator. And because Tua is a rookie quarterback, he probably doesn't want to make too many mistakes, and he might feel a little bit more risk averse and not throw it to the go up and get it guy like Devontae Parker. I know Preston can do that too, but you get what I'm saying. So Preston Williams definitely needs to be owned, and I think he can be flexed in a pinch in this game, but I would rather wait and see kind of how the split works out between those two. And then to the tight end position, both these guys have been super frustrating, Mike Gesicki and Tyler Higbee, but I think you could stream both of them, mainly because they have ceilings, and we've seen it. Gesicki's had a couple, had like a 100-yard game and like gets some decent usage in the red zone, and then Higbee, of course, had that 3-touchdown game against the Giants. So I know tight end is thin, and that's why these guys are both startable. But again, if you have better options, and hopefully you do, other than these guys, you should be starting them instead. To the Jets and the Chiefs, obviously you sit Darnold because you never start Darnold, and then you start Patrick Mahomes. Jets low-key haven't been that bad against fantasy quarterbacks, and we saw that last week. Everyone thought Josh Allen was like the QB1 on the week, and he was just going to absolutely torch the Jets defense, but that didn't happen. And again, we're talking about Patrick Mahomes here, so he'll probably be fine. But it's just something to monitor that the Jets haven't been like the smash matchup that a lot of people probably think they are just because they suck at actual football. To the running back position in this game, I would sit both Jets running backs, both Frank Gore and LaMichael Pirine. They're both widely available if you want to go pick them up. If you're screwed, you can emergency flex either guy, but a committee for the worst team in the NFL is not something I want a part of, and it's not something you should want a part of either. And I really hope that through listening to this channel and all that kind of stuff, you've prepared yourself better at running back so that you don't have to start these guys. But again, we've seen fluke injuries left and right, so it's very possible that people are going to have to be starting these dudes. And then to the Chiefs side of things, we obviously saw the first game of Le'Veon Bell in this past week. In CEH's first game with Bell, he only got 12 touches, which is concerning, but Bell only had 6. So I'm going to assume that in a better script where they don't have a special teams touchdown or a defensive touchdown, like it didn't seem like the Chiefs had the ball at all in this game. It was super weird. But this type of split hopefully keeps up where CEH has like 12 touches and Bell has 6. If you put that to a regular touch workload, that would be CEH has like 20 touches and Bell has 10, which is what I think the split is going to be like. And I really hope that's what it is going forward. But again, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. Maybe CEH. And he looked really good in this game too, the week prior. So I really hope CEH is able to keep that stronghold of the feature back role, which is what I think the coaching staff wants for him, as I mentioned in the past. To the wide receiver position, you obviously are going to start Jamison Crowder if he plays because he's the only consistent piece in the Jets offense. He would be going up against Tyrann Mathieu in the slot if he does play. If he doesn't play, I wouldn't play any Jets receivers. But again, keep an eye on Denzel Mims and monitor the practice reports for Crowder. To the Chiefs side of things, you start Hill, obviously, and then you low-end flex Mecole Hardman, I would say. So Hill hasn't been a great fantasy asset quite yet. We haven't seen Tyreek Hill be the top 5 receiver that he's always billed to be coming into every season. And it's probably due to the fact that the Chiefs are kind of like the Rams in the fact that they're only passing the ball 36 times a game, which is 19th in the NFL. And that's not exactly what you would expect to see coming from the high-flying Chiefs offense that we're all used to and that we saw in 2018 and 2019. I honestly, if you own Tyreek Hill, I wouldn't be opposed to trading him because he has a huge name. He has his name is ridiculous. You could probably get a guy like Keenan Allen plus a piece for him, or a guy like AJ Brown plus a piece for him. And I'd rather have those guys straight up than Tyreek Hill right now because the way the Chiefs offense is playing, they're just like game managing and Mahomes doesn't seem to have to do that much. And I'll probably look like an idiot and they'll probably throw for fucking 500 passing yards in this game and Tyreek will have 40 points. But nonetheless, I do think it's possible that that Hill has a lower floor than we're giving him credit for because he really hasn't shown the fact that he's like a top 5 receiver this season thus far. And in this game, he's going to be going up against Brian Poole, who is the best corner on the Jets. That's not really saying much. They all kind of suck. Mecole Hardman obviously has the best matchup on the field going up against Pierre Desir, who's just been absolutely dreadful aside from a couple picks. And then to the tight end position in this game, you obviously start Travis Kelce. He'll bounce back from the bad game he had last week. But again, the same passing game concerns are there for him too. He's not someone I'm willing to shop though because he is Travis Kelce and he's a stud. So I wouldn't be shopping him, but it is worth noting that the Chiefs offense has seen a bit of a downtick in terms of volume. To the Vikings and Packers, quarterback, start Aaron Rodgers, stream Kirk Cousins. Rodgers proved last week that the Bucs defense is just incredible because Aaron Rodgers' only bad game came against the Bucs defense and he absolutely shredded the Texans. In terms of Kirk Cousins, he's a viable starter in this matchup because after his great week 1 game against Green Bay, he had a great week 1 game against Green Bay the first time, and he's had 2 or more passing touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games and 250 plus yards in all 4. So he's actually, since Justin Jefferson has emerged, the first couple of weeks we were like, man, it's just Adam Thielen and no one else. Justin Jefferson's emergence has helped Kirk Cousins out tremendously because he has multiple options that he can throw the ball to. And I would also throw Irv Smith into that category as well, who's kind of emerged, as I mentioned. To the running back position, obviously, assuming Cook is healthy, and I think he will be, he's expected to practice in a limited fashion, which I saw a sleeper alert today saying that, but he is expected to play this Sunday. So I would assume going forward that Dalvin Cook is back from bye. I would hold Alexander Mattison if you're still holding on to him and wait and see if he plays. But if Cook plays, then you can drop Alexander Mattison. He's just a handcuff at this point. And to be fair, not really a great one if you played him the week before the bye. Assuming Aaron Jones is back also, which, I mean, I'm not really sure how that situation is going to go. But again, if Aaron Jones is back, you play him, obviously. And if he's out, I would play Jamal Williams. And A.J. Dillon I'm not messing with at all. So the running back position should be just kind of injury dependent, but otherwise straightforward if the main 2 guys are playing. To the wide receiver position, Adams is obviously a start after, just absolutely decimating the Texans. And then Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are auto starts as well. The primary defender expected to be on Adams is Cam Dantzler. And if Adams plays anything like he did last week, he will wipe the floor with literally any corner in the league, much less a 3rd-round rookie corner who plays for the Minnesota Vikings. So obviously Adams is my number 1 receiver on the week. And then Jair Alexander on the other side is becoming one of the worst matchups for fantasy receivers because we saw him shut down Mike Evans. We saw him shut down a number of other guys thus far this season. And we might see him shadow Adam Thielen in this game. And Thielen has been great and should perform despite this. According to PFF, Adam Thielen is actually like one of the highest graded receivers. As you can see there, he's at 88.9. I think he's only trailing his teammate in terms of his PFF grade. So this should be a good test for Jair Alexander. And if Adam Thielen doesn't perform in this game, then we might need to start fearing Jair Alexander, much like we did Stephon Gilmore last year, or Jalen Ramsey 2 years ago. Like, he might be a death sentence for fantasy receivers. But Adam Thielen, nonetheless, I do trust him in this game. Justin Jefferson, if Adam Thielen struggles, might feast in this game. And he might do that even if Adam Thielen's fine. He might stake his claim for Offensive Rookie of the Year this type of season that he's having thus far. It's going to be hard to beat out Justin Herbert, who's having a great season. He's a quarterback, so he'll probably get the nudge if push comes to shove. But Justin Jefferson, nonetheless, as I mentioned, number one graded receiver according to PFF. He's been incredible, and he's going up against Josh Jackson this week, who has not played well since. I mean, I really liked him coming out of Iowa, but he hasn't been very good. To the tight end position in this game, you stream Robert Tonyan and Irv Smith, as I mentioned. Tonyan is much like Tyler Higbee, where he's only really had one good game, and ECR still wants to rank him inside the top 10. If he does something again, if he proves that he's actually a viable fantasy starter, then I'll rank you higher. But Robert Tonyan, as far as I'm concerned, had one good game, and that's it. And then Irv Smith, on the other hand, as I mentioned, is an ascending player. The Vikings are going to sell at the deadline, and probably Kyle Rudolph if someone is willing to take his contract. The biggest indication for me is that Irv Smith's targets, his 5 targets that he's had in each of the last 2 games, his usage in the red zone, his snap share going up, all of this are telling that Irv Smith his role is growing, and going forward, he should continue to grow. So I would go grab him if he's on your waiver wire, even if you have a solid tight end already. To the Colts at Lions. To the quarterback position in this game, I actually think both are low-end streamers. I might regret this, but I actually think you could use Phillip Rivers in this game. Rivers is at 19, so he's barely usable for me, and Stafford is at 20. So neither of them are like really high-end guys, but they are low-end streamers, as I mentioned. And Rivers has shown a ceiling this past week. Before the bye, he played really well against Cincinnati, and this is another good matchup against Detroit. So this is the only type of matchup I'm willing to start Phillip Rivers in. And the Colts, the reason Stafford is so low, the Colts are one of the worst matchups for the fantasy quarterback position. So again, I don't want to start Matt Stafford if I can help it, but again, he has good weapons and all that kind of stuff. So if you do have to start him, he might be okay, but the Colts have not been great against the quarterbacks. Running back wise in this game, you start Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. Neither guy is at the point in this season. Neither guy is at the point in the running back kind of rankings where I would have thought them to be, given the fact that I thought they were going to have great roles in their offenses and all that kind of stuff. But due to this slate of the running back position overall and all the injuries that we've had, both of them are still startable, obviously. Swift finally took a stronghold of this backfield and expanded upon his role, so he could be flexed as a low-end RB2, but he's far from a sure thing. He could come out next week and have 5 touches. You got to risk it with DeAndre Swift if you have him. Obviously, if you have 4 other good running backs, then you sit DeAndre Swift, but I guarantee there's like maybe 5 people listening that are actually in that position, and the rest of you are scrambling for running backs. So if you have Swift, I would start him. And then Jared Smola, obviously, he tweets out the snap share every week. DeAndre Swift finally cracked over like a 40% snap share for the Lions. He saw an uptick in his route rate at 43%. And then he also saw about 14 touches, which is basically what Antonio Gibson has been seeing the last couple of weeks until he had a 20 carry game last week. But I think DeAndre Swift is going to continue to ascend. Hopefully, if you've stashed him this long, you just continue to do so. I would not be selling him if I've been stashing him this whole season, which I have been in one league. Wide receiver wise in this game, you start Kenny Golladay, obviously, because he's a fucking stud. And you low end flex T.Y. Hilton or Marvin Jones. The matchups for the Colts receivers are as follows, but I mean, none of these guys excite me. T.Y. Hilton going up against Jeff Okudah is fine, but T.Y. Hilton has had one solid game this season, and the rest of them have been duds. So if I can help it, if you're feeling risky, you can throw T.Y. Hilton into your lineup, but otherwise I don't want to do that. And Marcus Johnson, I know he had a good game before the bye, but I mean, he's just a guy. I don't really want to start him either. And then to the Lions side of things, obviously, every one of Kenny Galladay's catches last week was a highlight reel catch, and he's a freaking stud. So Kenny Golladay going up against Xavier Rhodes, who was playing well at the beginning of the season, is not so much anymore. Kenny Golladay should feast in that one. And then Marvin Jones finally kind of proved that he's a living human being and he's not completely dead, but he's still only a low-end flex play at best if you're absolutely desperate. He's going up against Rocky Sin, who's actually been pretty solid. So kind of we'll see what happens there. For some reason, ECR has Trey Burton really high, and I don't know why, because I think Mo Alley-Cox is going to be back from his knee injury coming off the bye week. He's had some time to heal, and then Jack Doyle's obviously still there. This is a tight end by committee. And yes, Burton performed, but it was on the back of touchdowns, and Alley-Cox should be back, as I mentioned. So I'd be fading Trey Burton. Don't start Trey Burton. I think that was the biggest trap I've ever seen. And then TJ Hawkinson, on the other hand, has been excellent in carving out his role. So you can continue to roll him out with no worries. And then to the Raiders at Browns, my start of the week at the quarterback position is Derek Carr. And you can stream Baker Mayfield as well. Carr hasn't posted less than 284 passing yards or 2 passing touchdowns since week 1. This guy has been consistently solid, even against Tampa Bay this past week. In Tampa Bay, we saw Aaron Rodgers absolutely get killed by Tampa Bay. So that's just kind of, and he also had missing pieces of his offensive line. His offensive line hadn't been practicing. I think it's time to put some respect on Derek Carr's name as a viable fantasy quarterback this season. Baker, on the other hand, has been kind of very predictable, much like Jared Goff. He's averaging nearly 8.9 yards per attempt against bottom third pass defenses versus under 6 against decent to great pass defenses. So I would say you could start Baker Mayfield over a guy like Phillip Rivers, over a guy like Matthew Stafford, over a guy like Drew Brees, over a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. But that's about the range I'm willing to go with him. I'm not going to be starting him over like Jared Goff even. I'm not going to be starting him over Teddy Bridgewater or anything like that. But I do think you could start Baker if you're screwed and you have like, I don't know, whoever's on Deshaun Watson on bye or whatever this week. And then to the running back position in this game, obviously you start both guys. Jacobs has been dealt an absolutely horrible hand of matchups the past couple weeks. And he's a great trade target, in my opinion. I think you're going to see me and Mike's trade target video tomorrow. And Jacobs is going to be in that video because I think this guy has had brutal matchups for a while now. And what we've seen him do in favorable ones, we saw it against Carolina in week 1, is kind of more indicative of what I see for him going forward, being that he gets better matchups going forward. But he's had some just brutal matchups, and anyone and their mother could have told you he was going to be bad against Tampa Bay last week. And then Kareem Hunt, obviously, in this game should be in for a field day because we saw him finally get his big game against a terrible run defense last week, and he's got another terrible run defense this week. So Kareem Hunt, obviously, great start in this one. And then to the one wide receiver position, much like my start of the week at the quarterback position, my start of the week at the wide receiver position is Henry Ruggs. And then also in this game, you can start Jarvis Landry and you can low end flex Rashard Higgins and Nelson Aguilar. So Cleveland is giving up the second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, only behind the Seahawks, which is like, and the weird thing is like they're 15 points behind the Seahawks. That's just how bad the Seahawks are giving up points to receivers. So I think you'll be able to start Ruggs. I think this might be his breakout game because Cleveland has not been good against fantasy wide receivers. It'll be interesting to see who his kind of matchup is. As of right now, PFF expects him to go up against Terrence Mitchell, which is advantage Ruggs, in my opinion. If he were going up against Denzel Ward, it's a little bit more shaky because in terms of like stature and like speed and all that kind of stuff, Denzel Ward matches up very well with Henry Ruggs. But they expect him to go up against Nelson Aguilar. And as I mentioned, Nelson Aguilar has pieced together some decent games. So I'll take him if I'm absolutely desperate. He's in my like top 50 at the receiver position, but I don't want to be starting him over anyone like half decent. And then to the Browns side of things, OBJ out for the year means that Jarvis Landry should see a target bump. Jarvis Landry saw 9.25 targets versus the 7.65 targets with Odell in the lineup since Jarvis Landry has been on the Browns. And he finished as wide receiver 18 in 2018 before Odell got there. So I think Jarvis definitely is a big beneficiary of Odell going down for the year. I mean, it'll be interesting to see because from what I remember in 2018, Baker like looked good, first of all. And maybe it was because he didn't have Odell. Maybe it's because he needs to be that alpha dog guy. And Odell is also that type of player. And he didn't, maybe he just didn't want to outshine Odell or whatever. Like this is all narrative-y and it could be completely incorrect, but I wouldn't be shocked if Baker starts playing better now that Odell is actually out of the lineup. And I know people are probably going to get pissed off at that comment, but I actually think it might be true. So Rashard Higgins, as I mentioned, is also worth keeping an eye on. I'm not really confident enough to roll him out yet. I know he had a decent game last week, but I kind of want to see him do it again if I'm going to be a believer. And I mean, PFF still has Odell Beckham on their shadow or their wide receiver cornerback chart, so just ignore him there. But Jarvis Landry going up against LaMarcus Joyner, who's been absolutely putrid in coverage this week, should be a great matchup for him. And I think he's definitely someone you can start with confidence. And then tight end wise in this game, you obviously start Darren Waller because he's like a target monster and he's just super good. And then whoever the tight end is for Cleveland, whoever the starting tight end is, you play them. Because if Hooper is back, who was coming off of appendicitis or appendectomy or whatever, he had a surgery to remove his appendix. If he's not there, then you play Harrison Bryant because he's looking really good and Baker obviously trusts this dude. But if he is there, then you play Austin Hooper because I think this is the position group that benefits from Odell the most, which is the tight ends because they have been kind of up and down. But with a major target hog not in the offense anymore, I do think that both of these guys definitely benefit from that. And then, as I mentioned, Titans and Bengals. This is the fastest paced game of the week in terms of like both teams having fast paces. In this game, I expect this to be very high scoring. I don't know what the over under is off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's pretty high. And I expect it to hit the over, to be honest. So in this game, you can start both quarterbacks. You start Tannehill and you start Burrow. Bengals are allowing top 10 numbers in touchdowns and yards to the quarterback position. Besides one bust game in Minnesota, Tannehill has been excellent. He's been good in every game that he's played. And then Burrow is a great streamer, not even really a streamer anymore. He's just a great start in this game as well. He's been good in good matchups and bad ones. Pretty simple. He's been bad against the Ravens and Colts, and he actually wasn't even that bad against the Colts. But in his good matchups against the Browns and stuff, he's been great. So to the running back position in this game, obviously you start Derrick Henry every week for the rest of time. And then whoever plays for Cincinnati, you're going to start them as well. Bengals have a bye week in week 9. So I'd imagine they're going to sit Joe Mixon in this game. If I had to guess, if they're going to be smart about this, they'd sit Joe Mixon. Then he has a bye week after that to fully recover. And in that case, if that's what they do, which is what I expect them to do, Gio Bernard will be a high-end RB2 yet again this week. And then to the wide receiver position in this game, you start A.J. Brown every week. You start Tyler Boyd. You start T. Higgins. You could flex A.J. Green, and you could flex Corey Davis. This is going to be a high-scoring game, as I mentioned. A lot of wide receiver production versus two defenses that suck at defending the pass. Brown is a top 10 wide receiver. A.J. Brown, that is, rest of season. Period, end of story. Like the way he's played, the way he's looked with Tannehill, he is a top 10 receiver the rest of the season. But we did see Corey Davis reemerge as a solid volume play. So that kind of puts him in wide receiver 4 range. He isn't going to be efficient with his targets because he's Corey Davis. But if you need a desperation play, you can play Corey Davis. As I mentioned, this should be a high-scoring game. In terms of the matchups, you'll see them right there. A.J. Brown going up against Darius Phillips shouldn't be too much of a contest for him there. And then Corey Davis and Adam Humphries have some decent matchups as well. This offense, and talking about the Bengals, has enough room for 3 receivers. Unlike the Rams, who I mentioned have been like bottom 5 in the NFL in terms of pass plays per game, the Bengals are actually number 2 in the NFL. 46 times per game on average they're throwing the ball, and I expect it to be close to that number in this game. It makes all 3 receivers startable. Even A.J. Green, based on his target share, the previous 2 games that A.J. Green has had, he received a lot of criticism, and maybe that's him kind of bouncing back and having these 2 good games that he's had. I think all these guys are startable. A.J. Green going up against Malcolm Butler, T. Higgins going up against Jonathan Joseph, and Tyler Boyd going up against, I can't even read that, but either way, they're not even good. Like, none of these guys are good corners. All these Bengals receivers should have advantages in this one and should be able to eat. To the tight end position, you start Jonnu Smith and you stream Drew Sample if you're absolutely desperate. Jonnu was coming off an injury last week, and he played his lowest snap share of the season. And I would imagine he's going to be back to 100% after this week, or after this past game. So don't worry about Jonnu Smith. And then Drew Sample had a decent game last week. Obviously, he's no sure thing by any means, but he could have another good game. Patriots and Bills. Quarterback-wise in this game, you stream Cam Newton and you start Josh Allen. Both guys are due for bounce backs. We all know about the rushing floors and the rushing upside that they present, but I believe this game has both of them bouncing back from a passing perspective. As I mentioned, this game should be pretty quick, should be fast-paced, and there might be a lot more scoring than we expect in this one. To the running back position, just gross. Both teams' running back situations are gross. I don't know or care about the Patriots backfield. In a full PPR, you can desperation flex James White and maybe Damian Harris if you're feeling extra desperate. But I don't like any of these situations. And the Bills honestly just might as well not even run the ball anymore because both their running backs suck ass. They're both terrible. Neither of which can crack 3.7 true yards per carry. They're both so inefficient that it's actually holding the offense back. You can low-end flex Singletary, but if he cracks 10 points, I'll be shocked because he sucks. And then to the wide receiver position, I would start only Stephon Diggs in this game. Beasley is fine. Like if you're desperate, you could probably start Cole Beasley, but that was a good matchup last week against the Jets. Brian Poole hadn't been playing as well as he'd been playing earlier in the season. And I can assure you Jonathan Jones is not a good matchup that he's going up against this week. So I would not be chasing last week's targets with Cole Beasley. Stephon Diggs will most definitely see shadow coverage from Stephon Gilmore in this game. He's been up and down, obviously, Stephon Gilmore, but it's still a little concerning for Diggs, but I think he'll be fine. I don't really care who the Pats receivers are going up against. Technically, Edelman has the best matchup on the field against Teron Johnson, but Edelman's been a shell of himself. He's been terrible, hence why I shouldn't have been high on him going into the season. If you guys followed the channel before the season, I was very ageist in my fantasy advice. I didn't like AJ Green. I didn't like David Johnson. I didn't like all these guys that are old. But Mark Ingram, and Julian Edelman were the two old guys that I actually did like. And I probably shouldn't have because they've both been shit. So maybe that needs to teach myself a lesson to be ageist across the board. Don't fall for any of these old guys. To the tight end position, there's absolutely no tight ends that you would start in this game. There's no Patriots tight ends and no Bills tight ends. So don't worry about that. 4 p.m. slate. Chargers at Broncos. Start Herbert and sit lock. You ride the Herbert wave until it crashes. 3+ touchdowns in 3 straight games thus far, in some bad matchups too. And he's got his ground game going last week. He got his ground game going last week, rushing the ball 9 times for like 60 yards. So hopefully we continue to see him run the ball more, because I think, honestly, I said this a couple days ago, but Justin Herbert is basically what we wanted Josh Allen to be. Josh Allen is still a good quarterback, I think, but when Josh Allen was coming out of school, people thought that Cleveland should take him first because he has like this tremendous ceiling and tremendous upside. The way that Justin Herbert is playing, that's how he is playing. He's playing like Josh Allen was billed to be. And then to the running back position in this game, you start Justin Jackson, you sit Josh Kelly, and you start Melvin Gordon. Jackson obviously didn't have the outing last week that he did against New Orleans, but his ability in the passing game should keep him relevant in this tough matchup on the ground against the Broncos. So I would definitely feel comfortable starting him. And it is a tough matchup on the ground, as I mentioned, which is why I'm not going to start Josh Kelly if I can help it. And then Melvin Gordon in this game is a workhorse runner as long as Lindsey is out. So Lindsey got a concussion last week. He's been dealing with other injuries and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see what his status is for this game. But if Phillip Lindsay is out again, Melvin Gordon is going to be a top 20 running back. And then wide receiver wise in this game, start Allen, you flex Judy, and maybe Williams as well, Mike Williams, and then you sit Tim Patrick. Allen has been absolutely unstoppable with Justin Herbert, so he never leaves your lineup. And then Mike Williams is kind of like McCole Hardman, where he just needs one play to kind of buoy his fantasy value on any given week. So I don't really hate him this week either. In terms of the matchups they're going up against, for whatever reason, they have AJ Boye on Jalen Guyton, who's a nice little story. He's actually been playing pretty well, but I'd imagine they're probably just trying to avoid Boye. He probably doesn't play shadow coverage or anything like that. So they're just going to play sides and get Keenan Allen and Mike Williams away from him. Tim Patrick, in my opinion, is not a thing. He don't fall for Tim Patrick. Judy is the guy to own in this offense going forward. And his schedule actually does lighten up going forward with Atlanta, Las Vegas, Miami, and New Orleans coming up after this week against the Chargers. So Jerry Judy also could be a nice little trade target if you need like a wide receiver 3 type to fill out your flex spot for the next couple of weeks. In this game, as I mentioned, though, Jerry Judy going up against Desmond King isn't the greatest matchup. And then Tim Patrick against Casey Hayward, also not the greatest matchup. So I don't really want to start Tim Patrick, but Judy will play as like a top 40 receiver if I need to. And then to the tight end position, both of these guys are solid top 10 options for the rest of the season. Fant should be back healthy, and Henry is also benefiting from the Herbert warpath that he's on. So definitely ride both of these guys. And then next game, 49ers at Seahawks. You quarterback-wise in this game, you obviously start Russell Wilson, and then you stream Jimmy Garoppolo in this game, as I mentioned. It's more about the matchup than it is for Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a risk, obviously, because he can be shit sometimes, but the Seahawks are one of only 2 teams to allow more than 30 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, the other team being the Falcons. So I think Jimmy Garoppolo is in for a half-decent game in this one. Look for a big game from George Kittle, big game from Brandon Ayuk, anyone else that's healthy, maybe even Kendrick Bourne does something. I don't know. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have a pretty good game in this one. To the running back position, because Carson's likely to be out for this game and probably out for a couple weeks, you can start Carlos Hyde. And then to the 49ers side of things, I think you can flex both guys, both the starting running backs there. Hyde should be the primary ball carrier, as I mentioned, with Carson out, and that makes him kind of flex worthy as like a top 30 running back. And then in terms of the 49ers, it's honestly a total toss-up between McKinnon and JaMychal Hasty, the undrafted free agent that they had get a couple carries last week, for whoever gets the majority of work. So if you're in need, I think you can flex either one and hope to God that Kyle Shanahan likes your guy that week. Wide receiver-wise in this game, Brandon Ayuk is a great start. Obviously, if he's not my start of the week, or he's like another guy that I would say is my start of the week, unlike Henry Ruggs, who I actually mentioned is my start of the week. And then Metcalf and Lockett are obviously great starts every week. Ayuk is the obvious fill-in, with Debo likely out for this game and likely out for probably another game or two after this with the hamstring injury he's dealing with. He's the best waiver ad, as I mentioned, if he's out there, because he's a borderline wide receiver 2 this week next week and the week after. Metcalf got so unlucky last week. I can't believe I was playing against Metcalf, and I have no idea how he didn't do better than he did. Lockett went nuclear in that game. He just absolutely killed all of Metcalf's value. I think Metcalf will bounce back in this one. I'll take a small victory lap because I said, and I quote last week, that I think Lockett is the best buy low in fantasy right now. And if you bought him low, then you just got like a 50-point game. So you're welcome if you actually did listen to me, but don't blame me if you did not listen to me because Lockett had a couple bad games before that. In this game, DK Metcalf going up against Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett is looking reborn. He's looking like the corner that he was earlier in his career before he dealt with so many injuries. And Metcalf might actually have a bit of a tougher matchup in this one. And then Tyler Lockett going up against Jamar Taylor ain't going to end well since Juan Williams, the slot corner for the 49ers, has been out. They've been really susceptible to that position. So Tyler Lockett is probably going to have another good game in this one. Hopefully Metcalf, they're able to move him around and get him off Jason Verrett because Jason Verrett has played very well. And then tight end wise, you start George Kittle. I think he's going to go absolutely bonkers in this game. I think he's a great play in DFS if you want to spend up at tight end because I think this is a game where he just absolutely snaps. And then no one on the Seahawks. I don't want to start Greg Olsen. He hasn't been consistent enough for me to throw him into my lineup. Saints Bears. In this game, I would sit both quarterbacks. Breeze without his weapons is just minimal upside. I don't want to start Drew Brees. I'd much rather start a guy like Derek Carr, like Teddy Bridgewater, even Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo, or Phillip Rivers. Just don't start Drew Brees in this one without Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. Just not a great situation. And then Nick Foles, honestly, I would rarely ever say there's a time you want to start Nick Foles. And this is like a good matchup, but I don't want to start him either. Running back wise in this game, you obviously start Alvin Kamara and then you start David Montgomery, even despite his vanilla nature of playing football. The targets have been absolutely absurd for Alvin Kamara. Let me know what you guys think about this trade. I just traded for Alvin Kamara in my big money league. I traded Joe Mixon, who's banged up right now. I traded Antonio Gibson, who's currently on bye. And then I traded Robert Woods, who's had a couple disappointing games. I traded all three of those guys for Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray because I just wanted the extra handcuff in case Alvin got hurt. But I think I won that trade because I have a very deep team. I have guys like Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins, J.K. Dobbins, and a couple other guys that can filter into my like flex positions if I need them. I feel comfortable giving up that kind of depth because Alvin Kamara is that much of a game changer. So let me know in the comments what you think about that trade. I'm sure it was a win-win for both of us because that guy had like a lot of injuries and just honestly needed startable players. And he definitely got that out of the guys that I gave him in the trade. And then David Montgomery in this game, obviously he's going to get his obligatory 17 carries for 39 yards, 5 receptions for 19 yards like usual, but he sucks, man. Like David Montgomery is not good. You just got to hope he gets one decent play, catches like a 30-yard receiving touchdown or like has like a 20-yard run where he gets into the end zone. Because otherwise he's going to suck. And he's so boring to watch. I can't believe some people thought this guy was like a second round running back when he came out. I didn't see it. I thought I was crazy. I was like, I don't see it with this guy. I don't know why everyone likes him so much. He's just like he's Sony Michel is what he exactly is. And not Sony Michel at Georgia. He's Sony Michel in the NFL. And then that's the end of my rant there. But wide receiver wise in this game, I would start only Allen Robinson in this game. Unless Michael Thomas is back, which I don't think he will be. I'm not starting any of these Saints guys in a bad matchup for wide receivers. We saw Woods and Kupp get absolutely shut down by the Bears corners. So I'm not going to be starting guys like freaking Deontay Harris or Traquan Smith or any of these dudes against the Chicago corners because they've been really good this season. A-Rob, on the other hand, will definitely draw Marshawn Lattimore in shadow coverage. And he's been kind of up and down this season. So I'm not overly worried about Allen Robinson, but he did have a bit of a down game against Jalen Ramsey last week. Tight end wise in this game, you start both. Cook continues to be a big play touchdown threat. So he's definitely startable in this game. And then Jimmy Graham revenge game. Let's go. He's playing the Saints. I'm not sure how many times he's played the Saints since he's been out of there, but he'll probably get up for this game. And this one could be kind of fun for him. I'd imagine he'll have a pretty decent game in this one. Sunday Night Football. And this is just a gross fucking primetime game. I can't believe they didn't flex this out. Quarterback wise in this game, yeah, Cowboys Eagles is the game that we have here. You sit Ben DiNucci. I didn't even know that was a human. And then you start Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was very high in ECR. When I went to rank Carson Wentz, I was like, okay, he's probably like a top 12 quarterback in ECR. He was like quarterback 5. So again, that's shocking. He's a good option this week going up against a defense that is like literally free cash. Cowboys are just brutal. They actually just cut Daryl Worley, who's like their worst corner, but they're cutting, like, who are you going to replace him with? Because you have no other good corners. And if you did, you wouldn't be starting Daryl Worley. So that's just a complete mess. So Carson Wentz is in my top 10 because this is just a great matchup. And then running back wise in this game, you have to start Zeke Elliott. I know he sucks. He's been so bad. He's been so trash. I don't know what you have to do, of what you can do if you have him. Luckily, I don't have him anywhere. Like, somehow by the skin of my teeth, I just don't have him. But you basically got to just keep rolling him out there and hope for the best. Maybe try and sell him if you want. If you could sell him for a guy like, I don't know, James Robinson. Like, the James Robinson owner's never going to give you James Robinson for Zeke Elliott. But if you can get a guy like, I don't know if it's too risky to say you want Antonio Gibson over Zeke Elliott. I don't think I'd go that far, but maybe a guy a little bit better than that. But Zeke Elliott, you gotta stick it out with him because he's too talented normally in this, like, the way he's used is too good, but I really don't know what to do with him at this point. I wish I had better advice for you guys, but I really don't. I think you just have to stick it out. Boston Scott should get solid volume with Sanders likely out, and you can feel comfortable playing him as a back end RB2. But again, don't get crazy and think that Boston Scott's like this RB1 type and start him over like Gio Bernard if Mixon's out. I would not be doing that. I think I would start him over like DeAndre Swift, but that's about it. To the wide receiver position in this game, Travis Fulgham, you definitely start him. And then Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, I think you could flex those guys. And if you're in a super huge pinch and you need to start John Hightower or fucking Greg Ward, I think you could do that. I'll admit I was wrong about Travis Fulgham. This dude is for real. And hopefully for Eagles fans, once Rager and Goddard come back, they'll have a nice young core of weapons to build around because Fulgham has had 10 plus targets in 3 straight games. So I think you could start him with confidence against Trayvon Diggs and the absolutely putrid Dallas secondary. Amari Cooper looks to be the solidified 1 on this team, and Lamb is the solidified 2. Whoever the hell plays quarterback in this game, I think these two can be solid, but do not start Michael Gallup. As you can see with the matchup chart, Michael Gallup has the worst matchup on the field, even though Darius Slay is probably going to shadow Amari Cooper. I still think Amari Cooper should have a decent game in this one. And then CeeDee Lamb going up against Crayvon LeBlanc is probably the best matchup on the field. So I would feel comfortable starting him as well. To the tight end position in this game, you could start Richard Rodgers and sit Dalton Schultz. As I mentioned with Gallup, Schultz is a guy that you can drop. I think without Dalton even in the fray or just any capable quarterback, I don't think you could start Michael Gallup or Dalton Schultz. And then Richard Rodgers, for whatever reason, Carson Wentz is just going to feed whoever his tight end is. Whoever exists there in Philly is going to get targets. So I think you could start Richard Rodgers as like a back-end tight end 1 or a back-end tight end 2. Sorry, not tight end 1. And then finally to Monday Night Football, the absolute shit fest that this is going to be. My Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to take on the New York Giants, and it's going to be a bloodbath. I'm going to tell you this right now, that they are going to kill them. Quarterback-wise, you start Drew Brees. You start Tom Brady in this game, and you sit Daniel Jones. The Giants haven't been a smash matchup for quarterbacks, but they have also played mostly bad quarterbacks. And yet they still rank bottom 6 in pass defense DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. So their fantasy points per game number in terms of like what they're allowing to quarterbacks might be a bit skewed by the fact that they've played Dwayne Haskins or Kyle Allen or whoever. Like, they played just bad quarterbacks. So that's why they're not allowing a lot of points. I'll trust the GOAT coming off of a 5-touchdown performance to actually dissect this defense because it is still bad. In this game, you start Ronald Jones, and I would sit all Giants running backs, and I think you can emergency flex, low-end flex Leonard Fournette. With Freeman's random disappearance this past week against the Eagles, against one of the 2 best run defenses, the other being the Steelers in the NFL, I would not start any of the Giants running backs because we don't know who to start, first of all. It's a bad offense in a terrible matchup, so don't start any of them. I'm sure you can find guys on the waiver. I'd rather start LaMichael Pirine than these guys. Like, I don't want to start any of these dudes. And then as far as the Tampa Bay side of things goes, Ronald Jones is still the ball carrier for this team, so you could still start him as a top 16 guy. Leonard Fournette is somehow becoming a scat back in the NFL, which I never thought I would say, because Rojo's got literal bricks for hands, and LaShawn McCoy can't make anyone miss. So I think Leonard Fournette is flex worthy just from the PPR aspect of it. And then to the wide receiver position in this game, you could start Evans, you could flex Miller, and then you can emergency flex Darius Slayton. I would say Mike Evans in this game runs into his good old pal, James Bradbury from Carolina, who historically has shut him down, has had his number, but also historically, Mike Evans has had 28.9 PPR points per game against the New York Giants defense. So who will win out? Is it going to be Bradbury? Is it going to be Mike Evans? Probably going to be Bradbury because he wasn't there the games that Mike Evans did well against the Giants. But if you buy into Evans is only good without the Godwin narrative, there's that. He might have a good game and a high target game because of that. But I would say Scotty Miller is going to be in for a good game in this one because Mike Evans is probably in for a tough matchup. And then the Giants, as I mentioned, this is going to be a bloodbath. I don't expect them to get anything going on offense. So I don't want to start any of their receivers because I don't think they're getting the ball to them because they're going to be so under pressure. They're going to be like DJ's going to get sacked like 8 times, probably have 5 turnovers. Like, if nothing else, you start the Bucs defense in this game because I don't think the Giants get anything going on offense. If they score more than like 7 points, I'll be shocked. As I mentioned with the wide receivers, Evans going up against Bradbury and then Scotty Miller going up against Ryan Lewis. And I think Tyler Johnson, if you're so desperate, I'd rather start Tyler Johnson than like a lot of like solid receivers. I don't know if I'd start him over like Darius Slayton, but he could have a good game in this one. He's been good when Godwin's been out of the lineup. And then finally, tight end wise in this game, you start Rob Gronkowski and you sit Evan Ingram. Jason Garrett has decided that Ingram, who runs a 4.4, is going to have 1 game with 10 yards per catch on the season. But Ingram has honestly just played like garbage too, so I don't really blame that on the coaching as much. This defense is just too good, and the Giants might score 7 points, as I mentioned. So just don't start any Giants offensive players if you can help it. And then finally, the Rob Gronkowski Gronkassance is here. Since OJ Howard's Achilles injury, Gronk has had 6, 8, and 8 targets with over 52 yards in every game and 2 touchdowns of the 3 games that he's played. So, I mean, Rob Gronkowski is an every week starter at tight end. I don't know what else to tell you. All right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a bit of a jam-packed episode this time around. So as always, guys, leave a like if you enjoyed it. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think of my trade. Let me know if you have any questions, trade questions, start sit questions. Leave them all in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Unlike the Podfather, we'll actually answer your questions and then hit the bell notification thing so that you're notified anytime we go live, anytime we post new videos. Join the Discord, all that kind of stuff. Patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Peace out, guys. Enjoy your Wednesday.